Welcome to Unfamiliar Territory, an anime podcast hosted by two white dudes who've been friends for over 15 years. We talk about the history and influence of anime, as well as review anime new and old, believe in the stars, and sail away for the future into unfamiliar territory.
My name is Grant.
And I'm Brantley. Heads up, spoilers on the way. Check the description, see if you're safe to listen. Today on Familiar Territory, we're going to honor the real heroes, the service workers who are underpaid and at risk during pandemic conditions, the activists who practice their right to organize and to protest against threats of violence and arrest, the suffering around the world who stand for their rights against their oppressors, and weird girls who disregard authority and learn to make peace with aliens on their first day of work. Today, we're talking about Gatchaman Crowds.
Hell yeah, we are.
If you're a weird girl, awesome.
Yep.
We support you.
So, we are, as we said, talking about the first season of Gatchaman Crowds. We'll be watching the second season in the future. I was introduced to the series back in college when I first started getting, super into anime. Mm-hmm. Not just, watching shonen shit, but, super into anime. And Brantley was like, hey, you gotta watch Gatchaman Crowds. It's amazing. And I fucking hated it. I watched 4 episodes. I'm like, Brantley, this sucks.
That was kind of our relationship back then. It was kind of like us showing each other anime. And I feel like maybe 12.5% of them were hits. And then the rest were misses. And it wasn't just us. It was other people we'd know too. They'd be like, oh, you should watch this. Like, oh, cool. Okay. And then it's
I don't know. I watched Durarara at that time, and I thought that was tight as hell.
12.5%. That's my estimation. But yes, you watched it first. You hated it. I watched it before that and recommended it to you. I loved it. And then what happened?
I liked it better watching it now.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think I like it even more than I liked it originally, which is...
All right. I was hoping that you would say I liked it less so we can talk about that, but I mean... I'm not going to make you fake your opinions for the sake of entertainment.
I can watch it a third time and I'll probably feel worse about it then. We'll just have to delay the episode a little longer.
So what is Gatchaman Crowds?
Okay.
Is it a game about putting money into a video game and getting a crowd of gacha characters?
No, we did an episode like that last time. This is a different episode.
I know, no, it was not last time, but I was just trying
to bring
back
been a
that
while.
shitty joke.
Yeah, because we did set up, we had the whole gacha thing going, and then we ended up combo breaking ourselves by reviewing Zombieland Saga Revenge. Go watch our video on Magia Records Season 2 and Tacked Off Destiny if you care to. But in the meantime, this is a Tatsunoko reboot of Science Ninja Team Gatchaman. So it's, in terms of reboots, this is more of a reimagining. This is a lot closer to something like Megalobox than Yatterman Knight, where there's very little resemblance from one to the other, different time periods, different characters, different plots. Everything top to bottom is pretty much different, except for some aesthetic holdovers and maybe a voice actor cameo here and there, and some other shared similarities that we've sort of picked up on thanks to skimming wikis and stuff like that. So we haven't seen the original Gatchaman, but I first encountered it through Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. And then so when Crowds came out, I was like, oh, I know that name. Went into it, and then the rest is history. So, even not having watched the original, I don't think it takes a lot of intuition to be watching Crowds and realize, they wouldn't be airing this back in, classical era Tatsunoko. Its focus is very different, even if it were to have more matching elements with characters and stuff. So, if you are a classic fan, then there are some elements that have been carried over. So, for example, J.J. Robinson, who's kind of the de facto leader and commissioner of the Gatchaman, he's actually being voiced by the original Ken the Eagle in the Japanese voiceover. And there are Galactor's there, but now it's Galax, and Sosai X is now X, the AI commander of Galax, and Berg Katz is here, but is, more so like the main antagonist as opposed to like Galactor, etc. Yeah, so there's stuff. There are little like lines to draw, but this is definitely not like a round two in usual like reboot fashion. I think it's a lot more modernized and appreciable in that sense. And we'll get into that through review. So, Grant, where would you like to start?
Let's talk about what the fuck a Gatchaman is. When your grandma comes in, he's like, "Hey, Sonny, what are you doing? You watching them Gatchamans?" And you're like, "Yes, I am." So Gatchaman is a fucking old thing. I know Brantley mentioned, like, if you're a classic fan, you'll know, but really, you might not. Because the original run was in 1972.
Yeah, it's resurfaced every now and then, but this was the first major, like, they've really reinvigorated it. Like, it's a new thing here.
Right. And so, like, Crowds is the newest version of it, and that was like 6 years ago. But, I mean, before that, it was 4 years ago and 11 years ago, so we might be, I don't know, due for another Gatchaman. But Gatchaman is basically like Power Rangers. It's the Sentai stuff. You have characters with thematic elements to their superhero mode. They fight the bad guys. It's very Saturday morning cartoon. And so what we have, and like Gatchaman has always been a thing about like conservation, environmentalism. It's always been kind of Captain Planet-y. So you always have like a overarching theme of like goodness, which is kind of dope as hell, because I think that Gatchaman Crowds is an insanely progressive show. And I think that it really continues to push the boundaries of what you're expecting out of Gatchaman. Gatchaman. You're expecting, a moral lesson, and it isn't the 1970s cartoon where it's like, hey kids, don't drive your cars everywhere, walk if you can, and recycle. And now it's like, hey, the state doesn't need to exist if everyone is willing to help each other out.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty interesting to see how this has been evolved from like this Saturday morning cartoon to what we got right now. So let's talk a little bit about Crowds specifically. Because like I said, I haven't seen a lot of Gatchaman. I've seen little bits and clips, but I'm not an expert. Gatchaman Crowds is about probably the weirdest main character in the history of anime. And that's not saying like, oh, she's so far out there. She is hella quirky. There is never a moment in this show where she's not quirky. And it's both fun, but also makes me a little upset. And her name is Hajime.
Yeah.
And she is the rookie of the Gatchaman society in her area. And so she basically gets recruited to be one of the superheroes. And so during the time she meets what's the other guy's name?
Sugane.
Sugane, who is a like samurai kendo guy who has been on the Gatchaman for a little bit. There's Joe Hibiki, who is my favorite, even though he has maybe 10 minutes of screen time total.
He's in it more than you remember, but he doesn't. There isn't a lot of like combat in this show overall. And Joe very much is like a sideline character compared to some of the other characters.
Yeah, Joe is he is like he's cool because he's an adult, while everyone else is mostly kids. He's like post university. He's super depressed, like just absolutely exhausted with day-to-day work. And he has this really, one of his arc is dealing with the fact that he might not be needed. He's pretty dope.
Oh, and also that's right. Joe is also another like carryover from original Gatchaman because there was Joe the Condor originally, and so now in Gatchaman Crowds we have Joe again. So he's another
Who's
staple.
like a yeah. You have OD,
Yeah. So OD is an alien who is
half alien.
yeah who is working essentially with the Earth team for the Gatchaman. Um, Essentially, OD's race slash planet was destroyed by the antagonist of the show, Bird Cats. And so, while grappling with that and trying to move on, OD is here, contributing along. And OD is not the only like participating like off-worlder here as well. So
Yeah. He's dope as hell.
Mhm.
I like OD a lot.
Yeah.
You have Utsutsu Miya, who is not an alien.
Apparently not, but I don't believe it. I reject it.
She's a high schooler who has like cat ears. And she's super shy and gloomy. That's what she says all the time.
And she can also clone herself and has like life exchange powers that aren't necessarily related to her being a Gatchaman. So
yeah, she can heal people, but she has to sacrifice her own life, but she can also take life so that she can get more life to heal people. It's fucked. it's they don't really go too far into it. There's a couple episodes where she's like the main focus, but man, she also wears a bikini sometimes, which is really weird.
Yeah, I don't care for that at all.
It doesn't make sense either.
Mm-hmm. And her other outfits are so much better. So
yeah. You have Pieman, who is also an alien, and Pieman is a little panda dude, but he's not a panda.
He just looks like a panda.
He looks like a panda, but he also likes pandas.
Secretly.
But
don't bug him too much about it.
And then there is Rui, who is kind of the deuterat. It's not antagonist, it's not protagonist. What's the other word?
Deuteragonist?
Yeah, it has dude in it. I always remember it because of that. Rui's interesting, and I think that they're going to be one of our more talked about characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should we go ahead and mention right now where the progressivisms already kind of exist within the character roster we have here?
Sure, let's do that.
Okay, so essentially these characters are interesting because they, again, we're talking like what, 2013?
Gatchaman Crowds came out in 2013.
Yes.
Gatchaman Crowds, the second season, came out in 2015.
Gotcha. Man. Gatchaman. Damn it.
There it is.
In the cast itself, like, we have characters that don't really like conform to gender standards or like seemingly like sexuality norms either, at least by like other characters' commentary. So for example, OD is very much like flamboyant and kind of like, I've seen some people categorize OD as like an Okama stereotype, where like kind of like a caricature of a gay man. The way this actually works in with OD's character, like, OD is not romantic, at least actively in the plot. But OD is like, in terms of presentation, pretty androgynous, and additionally, Berg Katz, one of the antagonist of the show, will specifically try to like, at least in the subbing that we watched of the show, will kind of make like homophobic remarks against OD to try to get him upset. Additionally, like OD and Paimon, for example, like, being aliens, they still go by like he, but who knows really what what their gender identities like break down to on a biological level for where they come from. But in any case, like, they go by he in the show subtitling that we watch, so that's what we're gonna go with. But I've also seen people refer to OD as they when talking about OD. So like, I personally, I'm already I get excited by this, by like the fact that we have characters of these like more wiggly boundaries on like who they are, how they identify and how they express themselves. Rui is another case of that. So Rui is a cross dresser essentially throughout the show. Rui is using feminine dress and like a wig and everything while being out in public, for plot reasons to hide their identity. But aside from that, Rui doesn't seem to be like phased at all or bothered. Like very, very comfortable moving into feminine expression.
Well,
and so that's interesting too.
Yeah, and at the end of the show, Rui goes to high school and dresses up and takes the female uniform.
Mm-hmm. Right. So
Rui's interesting. I haven't seen the second season, so I don't know how they go with that.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, in Insight, Rui is more like, at least like for example, Rui's Gatchaman form. Oops, shit. Whatever. Rui already had like, in this season, Rui has like powers, so whatever. But I want to say that Rui like explicitly still identifies as he, and like Rui's Gatchaman form is like pretty masculine looking. But yeah, it's at the very least like, here's a character who will identify as he very strongly. There's not really a case where I think like Rui necessarily picks up different pronouns, at least again in the subtitling we watched. So but either way, there is no hesitation or discomfort in the way that Rui dresses, and no one makes commentary against Rui for it either. So again, except for the antagonist who's like trying to push Rui's buttons. So that's refreshing. It feels kind of like maybe the the plot reasoning is the stronger factor in why Rui dresses like cross dresses out in public. But like again, this is, I'd say Rui doing so was like foundational for me. When I was originally watching this, it really kind of like forced me to slow down and ask some questions about myself. And then, that would have ultimately been one domino in me recognizing myself as gender fluid and, expressing myself in trans feminine ways sometimes. So, if nothing else, Rui is a highly, highly strong, like, strongly aligned towards like really like popular and trendy trans fashion right now. So I don't know if that means that Rui was predictive or like right on the money when I still hadn't really caught up with that part of myself and that part of society yet, but it works. It works.
It does. Rui's great, and also a badass bitch. But everyone in the show is kind of a badass bitch in one way or another. So the story of the show is pretty simple for the most part. You have Hajime, our protagonist, who basically stumbles into becoming a Gatchaman, and she gets paired up with Sugane, and after their first like fight together, she befriends this alien that is attacking her.
The mess.
And she's like, hey, they're friends. They just don't know what to do. And Hajime fights with scissors, which is fun. And Sugane fights with swords, which is,
Swords are cool.
Swords are
what
cool.
We say here at Familiar Territory.
They got a sword. Get on board. And so Hajime befriends Mess, which is the alien. And for the most part, after that happens in episode 2, there is a lot of it's mostly like rescues if they do anything. And it's kind of taking this idea of like, oh, maybe there isn't a villain. And then Berg Cats gets here, and Joe discovers Berg Cats, who's taking over humans and then causing them to do shitty things. And like, I'm gonna be honest, just absolutely terrible things, like murder and more murder, and then blaming someone on the murder that didn't do it. And so Joe fights Berg Cats and just loses. And they're like, oh fuck, we got this alien guy who can stop people. And all while this is doing it, there's this obsession with this app called Galax. And Galax is an app where if something's wrong, you can basically ping like, hey, is there anybody nearby that has first aid experience? And then a person with Galax will be like, hey, you have it. Go fucking help. And they do. Which is actually pretty interesting, but we'll talk about more of that in themes. So Berg Cats kind of becomes this number one, hey, we gotta deal with this shit. And Galax is ran by Rui, who is using the Crowds version of it to also do what the Gatchaman do. Where you can get a bunch of people to come help out instead of just these superheroes.
And eventually we'll find out that the power that Rui is passing on to people to essentially allow them to be sort of super users, that's given to Rui by Berg Cats. So there's some puppetry going on here, basically.
Yes. So Hajime and Rui go to stop this fire that is happening in this tunnel. And they're both doing it, and it's like, oh, who are these Crowds people? And Rui's like, the Gatchaman are here. What the hell? And that's a direct quote from the show. You can go
Sounds
look it
just
up.
like it.
Sounds just like the show. And so Hajime, ignoring all sense of logic or, everyone telling her not to, is like, hey, person, I am a Gatchaman. We should be friends. And everyone now knows that Hajime is a Gatchaman. And so we have a couple episodes after that where Utsu and Hajime are like, hey, we're going to hang out and just do girl stuff. We're going to pal around for the day. And it's fun. And so you get a couple of like downtimes here. And you get some little, like, these episodes also had some weird animation. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the middle section of the show sort of takes a production dip, I would say. I remember, like, we saw there was in the episode that's mainly focused on Hajime and Utsutsu, as they're going through the chase scene, there's a part where there was this little like black square on screen that was just kind of like layered on top of everything else. It definitely wasn't supposed to be there. And like I think we found it in multiple versions, right? It wasn't just like one copy.
It was an animation error. It was a black square that was on a layer above everything else.
Yeah. Which like sure, that's whatever, it's minor. It's far from the worst thing we've seen, but it's like that's only one case of like in general things kind of being like in a slump of quality, I think maybe towards like the middle or end of the show. I'm not the best judge of this because I watched this show with rose-tinted glasses, but if you care a lot about production quality, then don't get too excited when it gets into these more character-building centric episodes. Like, it's gonna slow down.
And it is unfortunate because this show does have a lot of well-animated scenes. It uses CGI for a lot of its fight scenes, and they look really good. But it's fine. And at the end of this kind of like gals being pals day, Rui's basically like, hey, I can do everything you can with the Galax app, so there's no reason to be a Gatchaman. And everyone's like, fuck that. I love being a superhero. And they leave Rui in the top of a hotel while fireworks go off. And you've probably seen that GIF because it gets posted a lot on New Year's. So Bird Cats is like, Rui, you're not causing enough chaos, so I'm going to pretend to be you, and I am going to cause chaos as you. So he allows people with the Crowds app to start doing just whatever the fuck they want.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh, that's right. I forgot to mention Bird Cats is also another one of our gender non-conforming sort of characters here in the roster. In the original Gatchaman, Bird Cats was a character who, like, if I remember correctly, could shift between like male and female, and so here they've kind of like mashed that together, and Bird Cats is androgynous. I think if I'm remembering correctly, Bird Cats gets referred to as they sometimes in subtitling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, which like makes sense for like, you know, being an alien, and also for like the human associations we put on Bird Cats. Either way, I think it's neat.
Diversity win.
Yeah.
Your mass murderer is
non-binary. Yeah. And if you watched Zombieland Saga Revenge recently, as of, you know, recording here, or you went and saw a review of that, our boy Kotaro, from Zombieland Saga voices Bird Cats.
It's great.
So
and it's one of those things where I'm like, is that Kotaro?
Yeah.
And then he does like and I'm like, yep, that's him.
Yep.
So this is where the kind of finale takes place, where you have the Crowds being used by people with less than. It's interesting because essentially the idea is the people that are using Crowds are like, well, if this world isn't going to help us, we'll help ourselves. And it's like, yeah, fight the power. But, you know, being controlled by Bird Cats kind of makes it not good. There's also a part where the Gatchaman do a little kindergarten. They go and see the kindergarteners, and they do a little presentation, and it's cute.
Yeah, it's like a little public event.
Because Hajime is like, hey, if we want people to like us, they need to like us. So we're gonna have a PR stunt. And that's fun. So the Neo 100, which are the Crowds that are doing the shit, start fucking around everything, and Rui's like, hey, I don't want this to happen. And they're like, well, we need to stop it. And so they use the Galax app, the Crowds app, to fight the evil Crowds with the Gatchaman. And then
they delegate power to everybody to become a member of Crowds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So everyone gets their weird big shaped digital Digimon. And so you get a final epic fight where all the Crowds are fighting the Neo 100 and with the Gatchaman, and Odie and Cats have like one last fight, and Odie is like told that he does have a Gatchaman form, but if he uses it, he'll blow up the earth. So they're like, hey, don't do that. So Cats and Odie have a fight. Odie almost dies. But they save the day.
They subdue Bird Cat seemingly.
And then Bird Cat starts fucking around, upset that his plan didn't work, because instead of having everyone have the power dissolve into chaos, everyone was using it to help each other. And so Bird Cats is like, no, I can't do this. And then so Hajime is like, hey, Bird Cats, come talk to me, and we'll put this aside one last time. And then Hajime gives Bird Cats a very, very big hug. And
hug in air quotes.
Yeah, hug in air quotes. And Bird Cats is absorbed by Hajime in a very, very long and weird scene. It lasted just like a little too long.
It was like a minute, I think, of just Hajime attempting to like fuse with Bird Cats and rolling around and screaming her head off.
Yeah, it's super weird.
It's by far the most uncomfortable part of the show.
Yeah,
which
very odd.
I think it has a purpose, but also, wow, like it's intense.
It's like the minute stare down in Evangelion.
Yeah.
So Hajime, a year later, a year happens. It goes like they do a jump cut, and Hajime's like a senior in high school, and Sugane graduated and is having a drink with Joe. That's a fun little moment. And that's basically Gatchaman Crowds. A very, very condensed version of Gatchaman Crowds, but it's Gatchaman Crowds.
Yeah. This is the kind of show that I think like you'll take to it not necessarily because of the individual beats of the show, but I think more so people care about the characters or the overarching themes. At least that's what I got from the original like press around this show. In fact, I think the first that I ever heard of it was because I was seeing like reactions to Hajime as a character, and it was very split. The good news is, if you're considering watching the show, your mileage is going to vary, like, based on Hajime and how much you get along with her, like, style of things. And you get so much of her in, like, the first episode that, like, that's basically your call, There is no 3-episode test here. You just need to have one episode with Hajime, and that's going to tell you whether or not, like, you can get into this, or you can even bear it. Because I know some people were out immediately. And I think that's, fine. Like, Hajime works for me, because she there's novelty in the way that she's like very overpowering and very positive. She doesn't waver much. You're not really gonna get like a character arc out of her. It's not like she's gonna walk in being all like, boisterous and proud and assured of herself, and then she's going to like scale back and start listening to authority more. It's not gonna happen. She is like the nearly uncontested voice of reason in this show, and practically everybody follows in line after her, which you might not dig. It's kind of unconventional.
And she's the voice of reason in a way that isn't like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's like, hey guys, instead of fighting this guy, let's be friends by talking to him and going out alone with no backup.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Hajime, that's fucking stupid. And she's like, well, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And she does it, and it works. It's a little frustrating because she doesn't do the right thing in terms of, like, the safe thing. She takes weird risks that don't make sense, and they don't ever make sense, but they pay off.
Every single time. Yeah.
She's kind of dumb. Just
she's sugary sweet and seemingly naive, but, like, that naivete sort of ends up, looking like wisdom in the end. And whether or not you think it's like luck or like, whatever it is that, allows her to lead, you'll have to figure that out for yourself, right? You'll have to interpret that your own way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where it can be grating, because there is a couple moments, there's like maybe 1 or 2 moments where Hajime will drop being naive and bubbly,
mm-hmm.
and you kind of look at it and you're like, wait a second. But then it doesn't tell you.
Mm-hmm.
It never outright tells you that this is a mastermind person who just happens to be bubbly and sweet. It's someone who's bubbly and sweet, and are they doing it because they have underlying plans that no one else knows? You'll never know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a show that I think resembles this kind of... Let's see. There's a show that, like, is very similar to that, like, that characterization where you have, like, this one person who's at the forefront who seemingly makes all these dumb decisions, but they pay off really conveniently and lead to peace. That would be Irresponsible Captain Tylor. So if you like that show, then you might like Gatchaman Crowds. If you like Gatchaman Crowds, you might like Irresponsible Captain Tylor. Both cases, it's about someone who seems like a fool, but ends up, leading to victory and resolution and, like, resolving, like, these bigger issues. So yeah, that's Hajime sort of in a nutshell. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about Hajime?
No, but I was gonna be like, let's continue to move on through our characters because we already there.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, what else sticks out to you about the characters then?
I mean, one of the things I liked about them is there was never like a ha 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 we don't like each other, or there wasn't like a lot of interpersonal drama between the characters. There were some things like, Hajime, you idiot, why did you show everyone your Gatchaman powers? But it's never so defined. It's never a focus, right? But I think what I like about the characters is that we get. It's kind of a cop out, but they're just fun.
Yeah.
Like, Sugane is supposed to be this incredibly like strict moral code. I am a swordsman and I am here to kick ass. But he's compensating, right? There's plenty of times where he doesn't think he has what it takes. You know, he still looks at himself as a child, even though he is, you know, no longer a kid. He still looks at himself as this weak person, and it's good. It's really good. Joe's great. I think Joe really is a good impression of someone who's just been doing shit for so long and doesn't feel like he has as much responsibility as he should. I like that he lost to Birdcats. I like that him losing to Birdcats was a driving force for his character, where he just didn't feel that he was, you know, good at what he does. OD's good. I like that OD knew everything that was going on. I like how unassuming he is. I like that kind of trope of unassuming powerful person. That's always fun. I liked Itsutsu and Hajime's relationship. I wish we got to see more of it. And then, of course, Pie-Man's fun. It's so weird that there is an entire episode dedicated to Pie-Man being scared of Birdcats. And he is, you know, he has this giant Gatchaman with wheels, and he's insanely competent. He's a good leader. And he's like, I don't know if we can do this. And it's weird because he's a tiny panda dude. It's really good. And then Rui is Rui. Like, we talked a lot about Rui, and we continue talking about Rui.
Yeah. Rui's probably the most, like, complex character in the show. Because Rui's kind of like the linchpin of all, like, the social revolution that's happening. You know, because Rui is the one who developed Galax and runs it under the codename Load. You know, Rui is the one who's making decisions on, like, hey, when we have this, you know, fringe group of, you know, these super users, the, you know, the Neo 100 that kind of are wanting to do things differently, do I give them their autonomy or do I cut them out? And Rui is where all these, like, bigger questions about the show happen. When Hajime's involved, there's usually some kind of optimistic direction the show is taking, where it's like, hey, you know, have we even tried to talk to the aliens that are capturing people and causing problems? Because even if we can't verbally communicate with them, maybe we can do something. You know, like, you get a lot of that, as we've described so far, very, like, sugary sweet, very, like, naive, yet, like, you know, clear vision from Hajime and her schemes with the Gatchaman. You know, whether it's, like, shaking Sugane out of his, like, sort of, follow the rules, you know, mode, and getting him to, you know, cause a distraction at school so they can stop, like, the milk from being distributed for lunch that day, because it was, you know, they're on the news, they heard it had gone bad. Like, you know, those things kind of have this, like, uplifting quality to it, and it's presented pretty sillily. It's presented as silly, right? Like, it's there's serious things happening. Yeah, sillily. But you know, it's there. The stakes in those parts of the show are not seemingly like drastic. When Hajime is pulling around Utsutsu from the from essentially people trying to ask about the Gatchaman, like sure, like there's something on the line, but it doesn't feel very intense. Really is where all the angst of the show is sitting, basically. And all the turmoil about like, these questions of societal change and power dynamics. That's where that's all happening. Really has a lot of responsibility, weighing down, and the way that they go about that is messy. And I like that. I think maybe some people looking at Bird Cats might seem like a weak villain. The way that essentially like basically in the early part of the series when we're still going through a lot of Gatchaman character development, Bird Cats will just kind of cause problems here and there where it's like, oh, there'll be a car crash at an intersection, or there'll be a stabbing, right? And that's because Bird Cats is sort of pulling a magical identity fraud and then like causing that to happen. And so it can feel like the shenanigans are sort of overrunning that stuff. And there's sort of two shows happening at once, but for whatever reason that didn't bother me. I felt like those parts of the show were cordoned off well enough and also bled into each other well enough that I could still read them as cohesively part of the same whole and kind of getting at the same thing. Yeah, which honestly I kind of wanted to talk with you about like the solutions that this show proposes and what you think about them. So where we kind of end up at the end of Gatchaman Crowds is that everybody's got their app, which helps tell them information about like what's going on in the community. Is there some kind of natural or man-made disaster that's going on? Does someone need help? Is there some kind of social event occurring? Like you can facilitate that all through the app, right? And so up until like the climax, this is shown for some emergency purposes and sometimes for fun. Like for example, Hajime and the scrapbooking group, where you've got like, hey, here's a member of the government and here's a fireman, and they're chilling together across their disciplinary boundaries, right? Like their careers are meant to be pretty important in their own right by delegation of power, but they're also here just having fun, just shooting the breeze and scrapbooking and stuff. And so like that eventually evolves into, hey, let's delegate power to everybody. If we're gonna have issues where we delegate power to some and then those some people consider themselves exceptional, whether it be a Gatchaman or it be a member of the crowds, then what if we just go fully open-ended and we essentially give power to everybody in a somewhat equal measure? You still are who you are individualistically, right? Like if you're still say the fireman, he's still a fireman, right? He still has those skills, but also he can use the power of crowds to check other people using the power of crowds in case they take things out of hand, right? And so they're basically saying, well, when discourse happens, like the majority will help settle things and whatnot. That's through information, and it's also through literal power in the sense that like they have these fantasy digital versions of themselves that can battle things out and like move heavy objects and things like that. And then by that extent, positions like say the prime minister become more aesthetic or more just like suggestive, I guess, where so when Sugiyama is essentially meant to be this important governmental figure, really doesn't have much formal power once people start busting out crowds, but that kind of allows Sugiyama to take off like the political mask a little bit and just start speaking more frankly. Sugiyama ends up doing less and listening more to crowds, but in that way, maybe that's what the people really want. is, to be able to, have their vote, more evenly represented, as opposed to one people collecting all the votes and making a decision for them. Which is to say, there's a lot going on in this show in terms of its politics, in terms of its like ideals. What in this mix of things do you think like makes sense or maybe doesn't make sense?
So, one of the things that I look at Gatchaman Crowds is that it is an absolute pinnacle of syndicalism, right? Where you have everyone has the same amount of power and everyone has a certain set of skills, and instead of relying on specific people, instead of relying on the police to do this or have the state come in and help, everyone helps, right? So you basically have this idea that as one of the you are it's about cooperation and mutual aid and how society would be better without this hierarchy. And I think that's really good. I think we see a lot of Birdcats is trying to capitalize on that, right? Like there's this idea where anarchy as a belief is chaos and ruin, but and the contrast, most of the time when situations like this happen, most people tend to help out and focus on the betterment of society. Think of Deca-Dence, for instance, right? Where we have the absolute abolishment of the state. And so essentially you have this commune where everyone in this city starts to work together for the betterment of society. And I think Crowds is about that, right? Galax is social media good ending, right? Yeah. Where you have a significant portion of the world using it, or even in the area using it, and instead of it becoming a place for advertisement and capitalism and data tracking, it is all about that social unification. And I dig that. I think that we have some you have a lot of the negative possibilities of it with the big plot of it with the Neo 100. But I think with the one dude who you looked up his name and I forgot his name.
You mean Mr. our favorite government man, Sugiyama?
Yeah, like you have Sugiyama, right, which is once he starts listening to Crowds, it's like, he's listening to everybody, right? He is no longer out of the hierarchy. He's not above them. He just has the resources to help the people. And so getting this society that is mutually benefiting each other, it works. I don't necessarily like that they use the Crowds to do it. I kind of find it almost Harrison Bergeron-esque, where it's like, hey, everyone is a giant digital head. And like when there's the part where the Crowds is playing baseball, I know it's supposed to be like, look, it's fun. They're playing baseball.
But it's kind of terrifying.
But I'm all right. I think the themes are in line, and I think that works. I just think that the underlying message of like, for everyone to be equal, everyone has to be a super powerful digital alien boy, which I don't like.
Yeah. It would seem that the show's approach to this is, instead of getting rid of the Gatchaman and the Crowds, and everybody is now just a regular human again, we're going to elevate everybody up to the level of, a Crowds, because then we can still keep making Gatchaman.
Yeah, well, and like the thing is that in an anarchist society, you would still need people like the Gatchaman, right? They wouldn't necessarily be above anyone, but in a society where you need people to rescue people or disaster relief,
right.
Having the Gatchaman is not a negative thing.
Yeah, being able to use, like, say, the Crowd's power to lift something heavy, right? Like, that's
right.
That's something that it's kind of in the same light of looking at, hey, industrialization got us here, and its entanglement with capitalism is real bad. Like, we're in a bad way because of this. But, you know, to give up these communication tools and these, medical facilities that, have benefited people, to throw all of that out, like, that could also be reductive or damaging. And so if we were to only move forward with all of this, the theoretical basis of that, like, how do we keep the good and make change against the bad? You know, it's interesting. At least that's what the position the show seems to be taking is, right? Like,
Right.
yeah, everyone gets to keep your smartphones. Like, everyone gets to have your little, like, super powered outlet. What happens with that? I kind of was hoping
Right.
that, like, particularly the second time I watched it, I was kind of like, I think I'd probably, on a personal level, would have preferred it if we powered down instead of powering up. But I can also, see the merit in what they're analogizing with this. It just so happens that they've, in using Gatchaman as their starting place, this feels like about as far as they can reach, right, without destroying the property
Yes.
itself. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think they did well with what they had. And we can thank the director and storyboard writer, Kenji Nakamura, who has been, most of his shit is about this kind of stuff.
Huh.
He wrote he wrote a critically acclaimed television series produced by Toei as well, called Mononoke.
Oh.
It's super weird. He made another one called C Control, which is about, like, the dangers of capitalism and how it leads people to be depressed and have suicide like tendencies. And so he this is something that he's consistently done for a while. Gatchaman Crowds was actually his last thing he's done, but he's currently working on a freelance anime with Twin Engine called Yotogi, codenamed Yotogi. We don't know what it is, and he announced this last year. So,
oh my God, he directed Suritama. And you know what? I've had the Money of Soul and Possibility Control on my, like, to watch for quite a while. So
yeah. So this dude, and he's also done some, like, he did some Big O episodes. But that's the guy, right? He works, he does a lot of this stuff. And I think he understands what he's doing, because I felt the themes in Gatchaman Crowd were incredibly well done. And it's just that it's still a Gatchaman anime.
Yeah.
Right? Not that it makes it any less. I just find it weird that instead of empowering people as people, they empower them as giant digital big head alien boys.
Yeah.
And I don't like the Crowd's design.
They're goofy looking.
They're so goofy and, like, a little scary. I don't like slender armed big head things. They make me uncomfortable.
Hey, the good news is if you turn into a Crowds and somebody decks you in the fucking face, then you'll transform into a cube, and then we can fire that out of a cannon so you can play custom Robo.
Hell yeah. So yeah, I dig what this show had to say about society.
Yeah.
Now, would it work? I don't trust the people that make social media to give a shit.
Yeah, we'll need some major steps taken to get from where we are to say this show's ideal, I think. Which is always a bummer, especially because, like, when things are as bad as they are, it very much pumps up the need to take larger steps, right? I mean, for example, when, say, minimum wage increases, like, we can't just, say, oh, well, we've had $7.50 for a while, could we please finally bump it up to 10? Like, that won't cut it anymore,
Right.
Like, we have to go higher than that. And so that strain really kind of puts a damper on marginal steps. But unless some fantastical changes were to happen in the ways people approach social media, you know, uh, publicity, privacy, uh, you know, corporate management, and like funding, like it's just it's not ready for that.
No.
Not to mention that like we would in a system like Crowds, you would have to give up, a decent, portion of your privacy for, being able to like essentially be part of this like, public system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that not everyone's prepared for. Especially when we've seen how poorly that's gone with the digital age, as
Right.
like, there was this big push for everyone to use their real names in social media, and I've seen studies that has made things worse in some ways. It's a different, it's a beast that will take its own evolutionary path, I think, to get us further. We can't just take this show as a blueprint. Not at all.
Yeah. It's the good ending.
Yes.
It's
utopian almost.
Because it is. It shows and unfortunately that requires a lot more than a super genius that sits on top of a building and powers things through a giant computer that talks to them.
Yeah.
But it's something that we can strive to. I think like most shows, Gatchaman Crowds kind of focuses on it being about one individual that brings it about instead of, a society as a whole.
Yeah.
But I think Gatchaman Crowds was able to give a look on how society does this kind of stuff, and I like that.
Yeah, it's good daydream material. By the way, if you don't care for any of this stuff, like even if you're not into like the trajectory of the show's messages, or you just like you can't view the show repetitively and it just feels like so much fluff, then at the very least, the music's great. It's bopping.
Yeah. Gatchaman.
Yeah, it's kind of like you've got like the usual like superhero symphonic style, but then they pumped it up as like dance club music.
It's fucking good, and sound design by this show. By the way, I had this up because of I knew we would talk about it. The music was by Taku Iwasaki.
Yeah.
Who has done Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, Soul Eater, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
This makes a whole lot of sense.
Katana Gatari, Noragami. He did see The Money of Soul and Possibility Control as well. He did Bungo Stray Dogs. He did Copcraft, which was a terrible show, but the music was good. He's done Persona stuff. This guy's like an all-star of making good music.
Yeah.
For a show.
So go listen. Go find the music for the show and listen to it. It's a good bop. It's awfully catchy.
He also, it's the main string is whenever something cool happens, it'll go Gatchaman, and I get fucking hyped every time.
Yeah. That's it.
He has a very he's able to put a theme to the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Soul Eater's kind of like hip hop jazz shit going on, and this like electric dance kind of shit.
Mm-hmm.
It works so well.
Yeah. It feels laboratory tested to be like good at getting you in the mood. It's clearly not, but it has that vibe. Just like they nailed this shit.
It's really good.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Other notes.
He also did the Row Fight the Power.
Oh,
so like
yeah. Again, like exactly. That's another one of those like theme songs that like doesn't get, it doesn't ever grate on you. It does exactly what it needs to. Okay. Overall, I don't think this beats Megalobox and Nomad Megalobox 2 as my favorite like Tatsunoko reboot. But I
Which is weird that you have that as a category anyway.
listen, I've seen 3 shows that fall into that category, and one of them was so fucking bad that it's raised the other 2 to, extreme
So
heights.
you have 3.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause
I think the thing is that Gatchaman Crowds is still a pie in the sky sci-fi pipe dream at times, while Megalobox is a little bit more down to earth.
Yeah.
That doesn't change the fact that Gatchaman Crowds is really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I like its messages. I like how they're able to continue keeping up with the Gatchaman themes of like progressivism in the most like far out way that you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for every detail we're mentioning here, I think there's probably like another handful that we're just, we don't have the time to mention. I agree. Like, I think that Megalobox is about like where we're at right now and what we could do about it more so than this show, which is, like you said, it's more pie in the sky, it's more utopic. And I think I like both. One more than the other at various stages of my life, right? It really just kind of depends where I'm at. Yeah. But yeah, I'll say if you really like Gatchaman Crowds, then dampen your expectations a little bit for Insight, the second season. I don't remember digging it nearly as much. Partially because they've kind of already they've dealt with such a strong antagonistic force that they don't one up it. They deliberately do something I feel like that's more ground level, and not like nearly as high stakes. And also Hajime is more of a background character compared to a new character they bring in. And that's also a bummer for me because Hajime really works for me. So we'll end up watching Insight at some point, hopefully, so we can review that and maybe do some comparison. But I frankly don't remember a lot of what happened in Insight. So we'll just
we'll watch it.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other notes on Gatchaman Crowds before we get into
I think
themes?
it's one of those shows that I think is still a hard sell to people. I couldn't be like, hey, you want to watch a show? Why don't you watch Gatchaman Crowds? I don't know who I'd recommend it to out of our friend group. Not because like I don't think they would like it, but it's hard to push the idea. Hey, do you want to watch Jess from New Girl dress up and stab people with scissors and also bring along the anarchist revolution? That sounds really cool, but it's going to take a lot longer for you to get to that part than you think.
Yeah, exactly.
And I will say Hajime is just Jess from New Girl, except her quirkiness is toned up to like a bazillion.
Yeah.
They even look alike.
Oh my god. Yeah. Hell, I think probably you'd have a better chance selling this on like the New Girl premise more than any of the superhero Gatchaman stuff. Because like in proportion, I think like the amount of time they spend on like solving crises and how interesting or like cool those crises are for them to solve, it's like a lesser part of the show in comparison, I think.
Yep.
I still like I don't know. There's the downtime in the show is quite like interesting. There's parts where you'll just have a sit down with Paimon, who's like essentially drinking himself into numbness because he's thinking about how he lost his closest friend and like how he's anxious
if you were
about
expecting
taking
to go into the show
responsibility.
and watch a panda describe as PTSD.
Yeah, right.
And it's good. It's impactful.
Yeah, but it's also, it doesn't have a lot of consistency, in terms of like its flow or the amount of like action or the amount of danger that you're getting yourself into. It kind of like waves wherever it pleases. So, that makes it a more difficult sell on entertainment value than compared to like, oh hey, Demon Slayer movie came out, let's go check that out, or so on and so forth. Okay, themes time.
There is one more
Yes.
thing. There's one more thing. If you do watch the show, make sure you watch the OVA Embrace.
Yes.
because the last episode is basically unfinished. If you watch what they do.
Yes, you will
like it,
yeah.
It's almost nothing. I was so confused.
Yeah. And in fact, if you want to watch Insight, then you'll be extremely confused as to how Bird Cat's gone into Hajime in the first place, like I was. So
Yes.
there are significant plot details you'll miss without Embrace. So that ends up being required watching.
Yes, Embrace is required. So themes.
I feel like personally the theme of the show, as it reads to me, is love, or desire. I take either one. And I don't think it's just that like there's kind of this like anime archetype of like, oh, I love all of humanity. Humanity is wonderful, or there's like the Death Note Ryuk version of that, which is like humans are so interesting. Like it doesn't play out like that. I think it's more rooted in like in Hajime's behaviors and in Berg Katz's behaviors and how they sort of inflect on people. Credit where credit's due. I feel like also I latched onto the theme of love because the theme song that you like so much, the Gatchaman, that song is called In the Name of Love. And so like that kind of got me thinking about it. So again, credit where credit's due.
You two also wrote In the Name of Love, but it's not as good.
I'm trying to come up with
trying
to come up with a YouTube joke, but I frankly know so little about them that I just besides that they had like they put their song out there on like everybody had their song on iTunes or whatever.
Yeah, they gave everyone a copy of their song from their newest album. Bono is Irish. He's got the glasses, and they're environmentalists.
See, they were doing an attempt to emancipate art and delegate power by gifting everyone U2.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? Anything that we discuss here in the themes and previously in the review, this also gets like messed up a little bit by technology being like a critical infrastructure of all the solutions that Gatchaman Crowds is recommending. Like there's some weirdness that gets brought in based on like the whole, hey, you need a smartphone, which like in the show they solve by like essentially saying, all right, if there's smartphones in stores sitting around right now, everyone's getting one. You don't have to pay for it. Like that's now considered like a universal need, is to have a smartphone and to have Galax installed.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't so much work if you have communities of people that don't feel like using that technology. And so like it's
or trust it.
Yeah, exactly. So there is an assimilative part of this, right? That they don't have to worry so much about because they just restrict it to this like seemingly well-to-do part of Japan. They don't investigate really into, well, I mean, with the short time they're given and also just with their plot interest, they're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of that and problematize it at all. So it's daydreamy, kind of like it's very fortunate that things work out the way they do. But in any case, with the power that they do have, and for everybody who's participating in the plot of Gatchaman Crowds, I feel like love is like the superstructure that Hajime and Bird Cats are like behaving through. So like, whereas like, for example, Sugane is looking for an authority figure to look to, whether it's Joe or JJ. Joe is working within, his kind of like dead-end government position and is kind of doing clerk work and whatever, and saying, well, this is what is being set out for us. This is all we can do. Even like, the Gatchaman, again, they're waiting on JJ to give them orders. And otherwise they're inert. But Hajime and Bird Cats are making change because they report to Desire. right? If Hajime wants to do something, Hajime is going to try to do it. If Birdcats wants to do something, they're going to try to do it. And that ends up being like the plot catalyst. And that ends up also being like the moral imperative of the show is that if everybody follows love, then things kind of tend to work out. So like, Hajime has no greater respect for authority than she would for any other given person. It starts in the school and then elevates up eventually to her just saying, see ya, JJ. After JJ gave her powers and everything.
Like there's the part where they're like listening to JJ and she just like walks up to him and is like, "Hey, what's up?"
Yeah. She doesn't elevate JJ and she doesn't disrespect him either, but she essentially walks on equal ground as he does, like in a very literal way, when she like walks on air over to like his platform. And in return, JJ doesn't force his leadership, and so in a way he's kind of on that same level. Birdcats also has no respect for authority, but it's pure impulse, right? It's power being unchecked that becomes an issue there. And so Birdcats is acting on impulses that are like that Birdcats knows to be dangerous. And therefore that requires the that dicey situation of like, all right, when do we take power away from Birdcats? How do we manage this, right? Is the solution incarceration? Is it violence? What is it going to be? So Birdcats doesn't really want to rule the world, but has like the ability to, as seen like through the histories of other Gatchaman members. And that at its core, the way it's such a liquid motive to just like, I just want to cause trouble right now. I just want to collapse things that aren't secure. I just want to see people react. Birdcats can't really be solved. And neither can Hajime's desires either. She gets people into trouble, for goodness sake. We talked earlier about how like sometimes she has terrible ideas that just happen to end up working out, right? But she and Birdcats have that in common, right? They act on love as this like directive. And essentially I think those things are compatible. But their actions lead to different degrees of chaos and different like consequences. So the difference between them is that Hajime does like she doesn't respect formal authority, but she respects the wants and needs of others and is invested in
she
them.
respects people.
Yeah.
Right? Like a title means nothing to Hajime.
Yeah.
Like she like straight up, there's the part where she's walking and the soldiers salute at her because they're like, oh, the Gatchaman is here. And she just like waves at them.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
It's like that's her, right? She doesn't give a shit who you are as long as you're nice.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't fucking matter if you're nice or not. She's going to be like, let's be friends.
Yeah. She does so with the mess, right? The mess are just kind of like capturing people because seemingly that's the way they communicate or the way they learn. And so she finds a nonverbal way to sort of like get through to them and cooperate. When you get to like Rui and Galax kind of going out of control, Hajime doesn't look to Rui and say, hey, fix this. This was up to you. Hajime has a greater sense of like love and wants and needs and is driven to just let's solve the problem as opposed to this is your problem to solve, not mine. And so like it's an interesting case of independence being used within their society. Birdcats will also just go and do something, but it is about like this is going to be your problem, not mine. And that's what Birdcats kind of is like motivated by. And there's no consent in that either. Birdcats will locks Rui out of Galax and out of access to X, because Birdcats wants to, and Birdcats wants to essentially see things get in the way, watch them fail. There's some like inherent like Schadenfreude or like humor in that.
Schadenfreude.
Schadenfreude. Word of the day.
What?
Oh, have you not heard that?
Well, I think you said it to me before, but I was just like, it's some weird shit that Brantley's on.
I learned it from Team Fortress 2, from the medic. I'm pretty sure it's. You know what? I'm not below this. I'm gonna go look it up because I'm pretty sure what it means is like enjoying someone's pain. But let's just double check it because we've been wrong about things before.
Almost constantly.
Pleasure derived from the misfortune of others. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Schadenfreude. There you go.
There we go.
So yeah, I think it's interesting that they, it's that whole like trope of like we aren't so different, you and I, but I feel like it actually has like it's not bullshit.
Right.
Yeah. And I think also love is consistent in like the collective actions that people are taking. The chain of command ends up getting dissolved as people start taking action right away, because they want to help people, right? They stop saying like, "Hey, what are your orders? What should we do?" They say, "Well, I'm standing right here. I should probably help out." And then you see like, for example, like the moms in the final episode who, when we get to the gamification part, which that's another thing. Gamification is another complicating factor in all of this that can, be used for good or bad. But the way they set it up, it's like, oh, hey, people need food out in the shelters, so let's just, while we're kind of taking a break, let's just go make some food for people. Like, we can do that. Let's go make some rice balls. And so essentially, it's in belief that people's self-interest is the self-interest of each other.
Right.
It's some of that like all people are good, kind of mentality. Which walking into the show, take it or leave it, right? It's not everybody's prerogative to see the world in that way, but that's what is core to this show. I think even like, looking at how they transform into Gatchaman, they have memo pads. Like it's not like some cool like crystal or like a little like, it's not their weapon or anything else. It's not a pendant. It's just something that you write down in when you want to do something, right? You leave a note to yourself that you would like to do this at some point. And so that's what turns them into their superpowered forms. And I think that speaks, and it's also, it ends up, again, this wraps back around the Gatchaman superpowers are kind of a weak point because there's still a power imbalance. They're still far more powerful than crowds, even once everyone has crowds intact. Like, I don't see like a time where, like crowds could gang up on one Gatchaman and then do something about it. Like, if someone went rogue, it would still be a problem. But I think all of this still shows in each of the characters as well. So, lightning round time. We're going to go through a bunch of cases of how characters like are kind of stuck in place before they sort of like reconnect with love. So starting with Sugane, he got rescued by Joe as a kid, and that was inspirational, but he's also kind of just been looking up to Joe and anybody else in a position of power to get things done. Hajime frees him up from that, starting with the school and with the mess, and essentially, shows him, hey, you've got these powers. They're kind of worthless if you're not using them, so you're gonna have to listen to yourself and figure out if you're ready to act. Joe, I think, is interesting because he takes failure really hard. When he loses to Bird Cats, like, it's crushing for him. Even more so than his usual, melodramatic mood. He's beat up about losing a fight, and really sort of separates himself from everybody. So he'll kind of discard his own self-interests to try to not be a burden and to not be a failure. but even when he's in like his government job, when he goes to the bartender there will talk to him about like, hey, what are you up to? Like, what are you doing with your life? His coworkers look up to him, and maybe it's a little bit annoying to him, but they still like they see him as someone good and someone worth talking to and engaging with.
Even before they find out he's a superhero.
Exactly, right? Like, Utsutsu has like a much more concrete version of this, where she's like, afraid to use her powers because she doesn't want to take life, and kind of worries that she might end up doing so. She sees the bad that she could do with her power, and so she refrains from ever stepping out of her comfort zone. But you have cases like where Hajime grabs her, and runs around with her, and they're making physical contact, and that's something that's really important for Utsutsu, whose powers work that way. For Hajime to just like grab her by, I don't remember if it was the wrist or the hand, but she grabs her and runs her around, and they have their silly little adventure, right? Like that lack of hesitation from Hajime, is kind of like this breaking moment for Utsutsu, who recognizes like, hey, nothing bad went wrong. Like, I didn't suck her life force out when we had our little runaway plan here. And everything's okay. There's Paimon, who lost his best friend, and so he's just drinking himself basically to death and just kind of waiting for that to come, which is terribly sad. But they go and see the kindergarten, and everybody loves him because he looks like a panda, for God's sakes.
He looks like a panda.
Yeah. And so like he may have lost someone who's very close to him, but there's all these other people who can care for him. It's kind of like Joe's little fan club at the office. Sometimes you isolate yourself so far from society that you forget that like people do care for other people for reasons that aren't simply personal history or incentives. Which the gamification part of that makes that a little muddier. But anyways, OD has a second chance at life, but he's dragging his way through with survivor's guilt. He's got a new home, he gets to live and do good, but he's chained to this question of like, what do I do with my power? Similar to Utsutsu, like, what if I cause damage? And he sees, Hajime walking into their situation and not reading anybody based on assumptions, she doesn't treat OD like, say, Bird Cats does. She doesn't, judge OD based on appearances or behavior, just kind of like they click, and so for OD living as long as like 300 years, for Hajime to just come in and be like, hi, what's up? Let's be friends. Like, again, it's this realization that love is out there. And that's moving.
Mm-hmm.
Rui gets some of this too. Again, Rui's like Rui kind of carries a lot of the baggage for the show. And so character arcs for Rui kind of are like, like a tide moving in and out throughout the series. But I think that by being challenged by Hajime and the Gatchaman team, that this like it becomes recognizable that self-governance is an option, right? That here's someone else who's doing what crowds would do, and it's not Rui. Rui's not the only person who's helping society. That god complex gets sort of shattered, right? And there's no longer this this feeling of having to hold the entire world on your shoulders alone. And then they work towards an imperfect solution, something that is going to be messy, is going to require them to be out there and visible, and they do all that, together. And I think, that's cool. Yeah, so that's why I feel like love is the most important part of Gatchaman Crowds. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Are you ready for hypotheticals? Or do you have thoughts?
Yep!
Yourself?
Nope. I mean, you nailed it, right? Like, I mean, I could talk about how I think Gatchaman Crowds is about the destruction of hierarchies, but we've already talked about that enough, and I think you did a very good job at expressing your shit take. I'm just kidding. So I can move to hypotheticals.
Yeah. Alrighty. So I've got two. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
What's one anime you'd love to see given the major do-over treatment? Like re-envisioning basically everything, like from the bottom up.
I gotta.
You want me to go with mine so you can think about it?
Yeah, you go with yours. I'm gonna get up my anime list and go to my sixes.
6, the number of salvageable. You know what? For me, it has to be Black Rock Shooter. Cause like,
and they're getting it,
right?
They're getting
right.
it. But I don't know if the new Black Rock Shooter is gonna be as because I don't think it's gonna have. I think Black Rock Shooter is a character, not a persona that exists in another world. So,
but that's kind of why I dig it, right? That's why it's like Black Rock Shooter to me so far has been like, such a funny case of like, of not having a centralized identity, like. Yeah, because there will be shows that's like, oh, we're gonna here's Gatchaman Crowds, here's Megalobox, we're gonna give you some familiar elements, but mostly it's gonna be its own new thing. I can't point to any one instance of Black Rock Shooter and say, yes, that is Black Rock Shooter. Like we can go back and say like, oh, the definitive version of Gatchaman is, you know, this superhero show that, you know, aired on TV as a, you know, a cartoon about, you know, justice and morals and whatever. But the source of Black Rock Shooter is fucking Miku fan art. And so
right.
it's very difficult to point to one single instance of it happening and be like, that is the Black Rock Shooter, because it never stays exactly the same. It always changes things up a little bit. And linearly, it hasn't ever been its own complete form, right? Like, we had the OVA, which came before a major TV series. And so, like, the TV series expands on things quite a bit. So it's like, does that mean that it's the more definitive version of Black Rock Shooter? Or is it derivative of the much more narrow version of what Black Rock Shooter is supposed to be? You know, like, is its truest form just this theme song? I don't know. They can redo that show 1,000 times. I just hope that they never stick with something. I hope they constantly throw it all out. I have done no research into the new iteration of Black Rock Shooter they're doing. I hope it's nothing like we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like the game, which was not interesting to me.
Oh boy.
I don't know. I don't know. I get my Black Rock Shooter news from a person I follow on Twitter.
As it should be. Black Rock Shooter is meant to be grassroots.
So I have the answer.
Okay.
I have the answer.
Hit me.
It's gotta be Rolling Girls.
Yep. Take 2.
It's gotta be Rolling Girls. It has to that show. They don't even need to change the characters, right? Just give it a take 2 and give it something else. And maybe I'd change my mind if I rewatched it again and I want to. So it's either Rolling Girls, or this is a really, really weird take. It could be this is like a way out there answer. Eve no Jiken.
Oh. Yeah, Time of Eve.
The Time of Eve. I think Time of Eve had some really weird shit that I didn't particularly like. But it also had some really good shit that I also really liked.
Yeah.
And so I kind of would rather see that entire show as a series and not a little OVA.
Mm-hmm. What would you want to preserve?
I would want to preserve I'd want to preserve most of the characters, but I would want to change, like, I think Sammy's relationship with Rikuo is a little weird at times. I really liked I would focus I would want to make it so like it'd be episodic. I'd want the main character to be the person running the cafe.
Yeah.
So you get different perspectives, and characters would come back, right? But I think it would be really cool to see like it kind of rotating cast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked it. I just thought there were times where I was like, man, this could have been so much better.
Yeah, gotcha. Oh, by the way, I need to shout out Noir, Madlax, and El Cazador de la Bruja, because they're apparently the exact same show done with like 3 different settings and like different characters, but they all have the exact same premise. Which I've seen Noir, and I want to see the other 2 at some point to confirm it, but they're each anime series made like 3 years apart from each other, but all of them have the premise of like there's an assassin lady, and she meets like, and she's kind of like energetic or upbeat and confident, and she meets like a much quieter and more reserved girl who probably has like amnesia of some sort, and she's also an assassin, but she doesn't know how she became an assassin, so they team up to try to learn about like their past and like and you know, assassination plots and stuff like that. And like, it's, according to what I've read, like, you know, it's like the same director every time. It's Koichi Mashimo, and it's just like they're all the same show. And that just that makes me very thrilled in concept. It sounds like such a wild strategy to take as a you know, someone involved in anime production. So if I can ever report back on that, I will do that. Okay, so last hypothetical here. What anime do you want to protect from being shamelessly rebooted 10 to 20 years from now?
Let's move to my 10.
While you're working on that, mine's Boogie Pop Phantom. Not because I think Boogie Pop Phantom is perfect. I don't even like the source material that much. I think I probably like the source material worse than like the, you know, I think it's 2000 is when Boogie Pop Phantom came out. But like they did like a 2019 sort of like retelling of Boogie Pop from the start. And they modernized it. Everybody's got smartphones and stuff, and all of the appeal got bleached out. And I realized how much that I like hate the internal logic of that show, and of that of Boogie Pop in general. So like, I want them to give up on Boogie Pop. I want to have that one half successful anime that I can think about every now and then never have to think about Boogie Pop ever again.
Okay, so my answer is trying to think of show Utena. I don't think they need to reboot Utena. I don't think they need to touch Utena. I don't think Utena needs a sequel series. I don't think Utena needs a reboot. Utena is Utena, and I don't want anyone to fucking do anything with it.
I agree.
I have things like Cowboy Bebop, right? That's one.
Oops,
I have things like Madoka Magica.
That one already happened right now.
I know.
They'll give it 10, 20 years, and they'll probably do it again.
And then I'm like Madoka Magica, but I kind of like Madoka's world, and I can see them doing interesting things with it. I wouldn't want them to reboot it. I thought about things like Revue Starlight or Little Witch Academia, but Little Witch Academia, the TV show, is technically a reboot of the OVA. Right? It's been done. But Utena cannot be anything else. If you try and change Utena, you're going to get something completely stupid.
Yeah.
Because Utena's already a little stupid. And if you try and remake Utena with that stupidity and it's not genuine, it's going to be very stupid.
That's a great way to put it.
Also, Wonder Egg Priority. I'll just throw that out there. I think Wonder Egg Priority needs a second season, but not a reboot.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
I think if you tried to change Wonder Egg Priority from the beginning, you're gonna get something whack. All right. I have a couple hypotheticals for you.
Bring them on.
All right. First hypothetical: you get your Gatchaman notebook, and they're like, "Hey, you're now a Gatchaman. What mundane object do you use as your weapon?"
Oh, that's a really good question. Let's see. Would you qualify a sword as a mundane object?
No, but like
Tsugane's got one
I'm
of
not.
those.
I'm not saying that every single one of them had mundane objects
Yeah,
as a weapon.
but I am forced to have a mundane object. I see. Okay.
Just like Hajime.
Yeah. My thoughts either go to like a microphone or like I kind of want to say a stapler.
Okay. Do you use a stapler often?
There was a point in my life where I was essentially I was the poster creator for I'd make the flyers for an art club as a part of.
Oh, right.
And so I'd go around and I'd staple all of them up. And so I guess I relate staples to that as like a binding element. Like you go and you staple things onto, to post a message to everybody or whatever. But that's kind of close to Hajime's craft supplies. Whatever. I'll yank her style. That's fine. She won't care. She'll love it. She'll love it.
Yeah, she would think she'd be like, "Oh, you got craft supplies too? We should be friends."
Besties. Oh, I didn't mention this before. I love in the show when she first enters the Gatchaman lair and Joe throws a dart right past her face, and then later she comes down in the lair and she like throws her scissors into the dartboard or like the wall or something. Yeah. I feel like she like learned that from Joe, and I think that's hilarious. And also dangerous. Jesus Christ.
Very dangerous.
Well, how about you?
Oh, you know the answer.
Of course I do, wife.
It's a gun.
Oh, fuck you. That's not a mundane object.
In America, it is.
Don't remind me.
No, I think I would want like either like I'm trying to think too. I had this idea for you to answer it, and then when you said it, I'm like, oh man, I could do the gun joke again.
I mean, you could do like you could pull Persona 5 and you have like a BB gun that turns into like it's an airsoft gun that turns into like a superpower magic gun when you do.
I could do I would really like Magic the Gathering cards.
Oh, that'd be sick.
So I have like different decks that do different shit. That'd be tight as hell.
Yeah.
One time when I was thinking of like in high school of doing some sort of like graphic novel that's like akin to Scott Pilgrim, where people have superpowers and they're just random. Thought about a guy who just had a magic deck and just played Magic the Gathering, but as if it was real. So if he cast Lightning Bolt using his card, it would cost actual Lightning Bolt. That was short lived. My final question.
Yeah.
All right, Galax has become a staple in the world. Everyone has it. All the problems of large scale data tracking are no longer a thing. And you're walking down the street and Galax alerts you to something. They need your help. What skill do you have on your Galax app that they're looking for?
It's a great question. Let me think about it. I think I would be requested for my skills as a doormat. Like Galax pops up and they're like, "Hey, would you like to earn 100 points? Go step in this puddle and lay down in it for somebody."
So sad. They wouldn't need you to like, hey, someone needs help designing a logo for their home goods bake store. Nah, doormat.
I can come up with plenty of people who can make a poster, but listen.
No.
In the name of love, who's gonna go lay down in a puddle?
Fair. That's good.
It also gives me something to bitch about, which is like that's conducive to my own lifestyle.
That's fair. I don't know if you can hear it, but I am popping in a leave. I have a headache.
Oh, caused by this episode.
No. If my Galax app pinged me and they were like, "Hey, what do you need?" Like, I have CPR training, I have first aid training, I know how to like stitch skin together. Mm-hmm. I've taken some pretty intense first aid shit, but it would definitely be someone needs just to be yelled at for doing something just annoying and stupid. Like, hey, this boss is being mean to someone. You're your talents as a shit starter are needed. And I'd come in and I'd start yelling at people. Like someone's at Thanksgiving and their uncle goes on a racist tirade and they're like, man, I wish someone was here just to tell him off. And I'm, ba-dink, here I am. What's up, everybody?
You get a push notification and it says, Grant, you have to defend women online.
Here I come.
On it. And bing, 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 you get all their points for the day.
Hell yeah. So, do you have anything else to say about Gatchaman Crowds, the first one?
Nope, I think we're all done here.
Yeah, honestly, longer episode than I anticipated.
Yeah.
When we got to like an hour, I was like, man, we're almost done. And we kept talking.
Yeah.
So, good episode.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think it is.
Yeah.
The comments might say otherwise. Their next thing we're going to be doing, I believe, is our tier list.
Yep. Round 2.
We're going to be taking all the anime that we've seen in 2021 and the beginning of 2022 and composing a tier list based on the one that we did last year. So if you're listening to us and you're like, man, what the fuck are they talking about? You can go watch our tier list episode from 2000 and last year, 2021. It's actually one of my favorites to go back to.
Mm-hmm. It's
just very silly and it's very casual. And I like it a lot. Also, we get to see some live graphic designing by Brantley, and that's really fun.
We didn't want to use tier maker.
But afterward, yeah, tier maker sucks. But after we do that, we'll probably move on to Gatchaman 2, which is going to be really weird that one's not making it in the tier list. But hey, it's our show.
Yeah.
Fuck you. If you like what you listen to, you can follow us on Twitter. That will be linked in the description below. We also do a Twitch stream. We stream every Monday. We have a backlog of fucking games. Right now we're doing Hero Hours Contract, but that's probably going to end soon. And we'll probably move on to some other games. Deadly Premonition 2 is a favorite of ours. You can follow us on Twitch, follow us on Twitter. If you liked what you listened to, be sure to leave a comment. I love comments. I get a lot of good comments, and every time I do, I get a little bit happy on the inside. Or you can subscribe so you make me even more happier that people are at least pretending that they're interested in listening to us. But you also don't need to do any of that because we are not your dads.